The Minnesota Timberwolves have been, I would argue, the surprise in the NBA to begin this season because the vibes last year were so terrible. Cat got hurt. They never really got a chance to play Cat and Gobert together. Even when they did play together, they weren't particularly good. Throughout the entirety of the regular season, it was a disappointment. It was a team that made a big move to try and push themselves towards title contention and ended up just kind of as a play-in team that actually did play Denver well in the postseason, but we didn't really know what to expect out of them coming into this season. And now, pretty much everything has changed, and like Minnesota might have actually nailed the Gobert trade, and they might actually be contenders also. Quickly, I have something for you. Playback.tv/sportinglogically. If you guys want to have an opportunity to hang out with me, watch some NBA games with me, the rest of the community, playback.tv/sportinglogically. Go join the room. It's going to be an awesome time. It's something I'm going to do weekly from now on, but go join the room, playback.tv/sportinglogically. Now, to be fair, the Gobert trade still on paper in terms of value was still terrible, and he's been helpful for them and really good, and we're going to talk about that, but still on paper, when you look at the deal, they gave up too much for Gobert, given the contract, given the age, given some of the slippage in terms of defensive efficiency, and no other team in the league was going to come remotely close to what Minnesota traded in exchange for Rudy Gobert. But the thought process, the theory behind the Gobert trade might actually have been spot on, because the thought process at the time was, we have Ant, we have Cat, we have some interesting guys on the wings. We want to consolidate these role players, these other guys that are like good but not fantastic that we've accumulated over the years that allowed us to go into the postseason that year before the Rudy Gobert trade. We want to consolidate all those guys into someone that pushes us up a level. We don't just want to sit at this level. We don't just want to be a second-tier team. We want to push for contender status. And the theory behind that kind of makes sense now, even though last year it was kind of like, how are they going to get these two guys to play well together? This like Twin Towers thing of Cat and Gobert is just really strange. And then obviously last year, Cat being hurt and then them not playing particularly well when those two guys were together completely derailed that entire situation. But now things are a little bit different in Minnesota, right? Now, obviously, the guy that has to be mentioned here is Anthony Edwards. Anthony Edwards is playing like an MVP caliber guy. Cat's numbers are awesome as well. Those two guys in combination, especially offensively, have been absolutely devastating to begin this season. And without a leap from Anthony Edwards and without good offensive production from Cat, we're not having this conversation. We're still talking about the Gobert trade as one of the worst trades in the history of the NBA. And Gobert has been helpful. And I know, like I said, we're going to talk about that, but it has to be mentioned how unbelievable Anthony Edwards is. And it's so difficult to get that kind of guy on the perimeter that is as good as he is and can lead your team and can guard as well when he really wants to. And then, of course, McDaniels is there as well. A lot of people, myself included, kind of made fun of Minnesota because they kept McDaniels out of the Gobert trade, and they kind of, the rationale after the Gobert trade was that, oh, we kept McDaniels, and everybody's like, okay, that's fine, like he's solid, but you still gave up a lot. Turns out McDaniels extremely good. They gave him a new contract, really, really good wing defender, incredible wing defender even, and those four guys collectively together, Cat, Gobert, McDaniels, Anthony Edwards, that core of players, as they continue to grow, figure more things out this year, I'm starting to think more and more about them as one of the top teams in the conference and a potential conference finals contender, obviously with them at the top of the West right now as the recording of this video. And that's not really a place I thought Minnesota was going to be. I talked in the offseason about how, if Anthony Edwards took another leap, there were some signs, especially in the postseason last year, that this Timberwolves team was actually really well constructed and they just didn't have an opportunity to really play well together. And it really was built around Ant. And I was like, maybe they could be like a top 4 team in the West. And that was a realistic possibility. But what they've been to begin this season has been completely different. And now we have to talk about the Gobert of it all. When they traded for Gobert, one of the main reasons I didn't love it was obviously the contract and the age, but also he just wasn't as good. Like we were starting to see slippage in terms of how good he was defensively as he got older. And so Minnesota was trading for a guy that they thought was going to elevate them, and he was going to make them better defensively. It was the thing they needed to improve the most was as a defensive team. And Gobert at the time was just, if you put him on the team, you're going to be a top 10 team in the league defensively, but he was starting to show some slippage in terms of the advanced stats. And that was one of the main reasons I didn't like the deal, not to mention the value they traded away in exchange for Gobert. But this season, to begin this year, he's looked healthier than he was last year. He has looked like Defensive Player of the Year Rudy Gobert. He's ruining entire offensive possessions by himself. He's preventing shots at the rim all by himself. It's not just that he's getting blocks. Like guys aren't even trying to attempt shots at the rim, and they kind of figured out the Cat and Gobert thing. Not entirely, but when you have someone like Rudy Gobert out there and they're playing together, he can make up for a lot of mistakes, and then they're still playing really well when Gobert's off the floor and Cat's out there, or Cat's off the floor and Gobert's out there. And if they can continue to get that figured out, and Anthony Edwards is going to be this guy, McDaniels is going to be awesome on the wing, and their depth is going to be this good, and they're going to be able to space the floor this well, they're going to be a really, really tough team to deal with in the postseason because of their size, because of Anthony Edwards' ability to finish games, and because of how good they can be on the defensive end of the floor. And as much as I still don't love the value of the Gobert trade, and I think a lot of people still are thinking of it as a pretty terrible deal from a value standpoint, at the end of the day, if that's the deal that pushes Minnesota to the conference finals, to making the finals, it's an unbelievable deal because even as much as Anthony Edwards has taken the leap and Cat's been good, like the defensive improvement that they've made, especially to begin this year, would not have been there without Gobert. I don't think there was a single player in the league they could have traded for realistically that actually would have been available for trade. They would have been able to transform their defense this much and in this way, and that was the thing that they mostly needed to improve. And it's made me rethink the deal in hindsight, because even though they gave up too much, and you never convinced me that they should have given up that much, him as the legitimate missing piece to a conference finals or a finals team in Minnesota is starting to become a real possibility. Now, still at the end of the day, one of the main things that people didn't like about Gobert in Utah was in the postseason, things get kind of weird, right? Teams would play small against Utah. Of course, Terrence Mann is, over in the corner knocking down threes, and Gobert's just standing in the paint, and teams going small is going to continue to be an issue. But Minnesota is set up kind of uniquely to deal with that, because teams are not going to be able to go small and guard this team, because the problem with Gobert in terms of teams going small was he couldn't punish 6'5" guys in the post. He could punish them on the offensive glass. He's been, I think, either the best or one of the best offensive rebounders in the league by per game numbers to begin this season. That's the way he would punish smaller teams before. But if the team could rebound, there was really no negative to going small against Gobert. You get great shots on offense, and he couldn't punish you defensively. But with Cat out there, Cat can absolutely punish a team for going small against him in the post. And those two guys together on the offensive glass, that might not really be an option. And so even though it's unconventional putting these two big guys together, Cat's skill set offensively and Gobert's skill set defensively kind of works perfectly together, and their collective size might have also solved the going small against Gobert in the postseason issue as well. It's a really interesting combination that we just kind of wrote off last year when we really didn't get a chance to see a lot of it. And I know that we're still so early in the season, but I kind of can't wait to see what Minnesota looks like against some of the best teams in the league and in the postseason potentially. And I hope that this level of play for them continues the entire year, because it just adds another wrinkle to the season and adds another wrinkle to a trade that I still believe from a value perspective was terrible, but in terms of outcome and in terms of like capitalizing on the theory that they had with the deal at the time, might actually have been genius. Now, of course, the other outcome of this is that it was just a really hot shooting start to the season for Minnesota, and maybe there's going to be some potential injury stuff like there was with Cat last year. Obviously, Gobert's getting older, but the one thing that I'm very confident in is that Anthony Edwards is going to continue to be the guy he's been to begin this year, and has certainly made a leap and might still have another leap to go next year and over the next couple of seasons. He is one of my favorite players to watch in the league. His continued growth and development from where he was as a draft prospect in a very weird 2020 draft where people had a really hard time figuring out the top three in that draft, to where Anthony Edwards is now as this incredible offensive player that shoots the ball extremely well from three. You can't keep him away from the rim, and when he wants to, is an incredible defensive player as well. I'm not sure that you could pick a better outcome for how his career has started. And now that they've kind of gotten rid of D'Angelo Russell and prioritized him even more on ball offensively, the sky's the limit for him. And, as much as we want to say good things about the Gobert trade, the sky's the limit for this team. And a lot of it has to do, of course, with Anthony Edwards.